Signs and wonders. Some time after this, Jesus crossed to the far shore of the Sea of Galilee, that is, the Sea of Tiberias, and a great crowd of people followed him, because they saw the signs he had performed by healing those who were ill. Then Jesus went up on a mountainside and sat down with his disciples. The Jewish Passover festival was near. When Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming towards him, he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread for these people to eat?" He asked this only to test him, for he had already in mind what he was going to do. Philip answered him, "It would take more than half a year's wages to buy enough bread for each one to have a bite." Another of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. "Here is a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish. But how far will they go among so many?" Jesus said, "Make the people sit down." There was plenty of grass in that place, and they sat down. About 5,000 men were there. Jesus then took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed to those who were seated, as much as they wanted. He did the same with the fish. When they had all had enough to eat, he said to his disciples, "Gather the pieces that are left over. Let nothing be wasted." So they gathered them and filled 12 baskets with the pieces of 5 barley loaves left over by those who had eaten. After the people saw the sign Jesus performed, they began to say, "Surely this is the prophet who is come into the world." When I suffered a recent recurrence of an old back injury, the pain was excruciating, and my mind started dwelling on how bleak the future seemed. After a particularly dark few days, I lay in my bedroom, in pain and frustrated. I looked outside, and there on the telephone wire, staring at me, was a goldfinch. I hadn't seen one for a long time, perhaps even years. For a brief moment my worries faded, and I was entranced by this beautiful visitor. As it flew away, I reached down for my iPad, and for some reason I googled, "What is the meaning of seeing a goldfinch?" I was immediately faced with dozens of classical paintings of Jesus holding goldfinches. It turns out there has long been a link between faith and the goldfinch, and it was even believed that the bird got its red face from trying to remove Jesus' crown of thorns. I then read that down the years the goldfinch was regarded as a bird of healing. There I was, in pain and despair, and I was visited by a traditional icon of healing and hope. Was that just a coincidence? Did God somehow send that goldfinch? Was it God who prompted me to Google the meaning of this small bird? I am not sure about any of those things, but I do know that God spoke to me through that goldfinch. I do know that my life was open to his kingdom of hope and joy through that small bird. To me, that goldfinch became a sign. It became a source of hope at a time when I felt only hopelessness. It became a beacon of light when all I was seeing was darkness. It became a glimpse, however faint, of joy when all I was feeling was pessimism and despair. Today's passage is one of the 7 miracles in John's Gospel. But John does not call these events miracles. Instead, these wonder stories are referred to by the Greek word semia, which is translated signs. In fact, some scholars think that when writing his Gospel, John may have used a separate, earlier document known as the Signs Source, which contained all 7 of these signs. Whether John used such a document or not, one thing is certain. The stories are hugely important to him. To him, they show who Jesus really is and what he brings to us and reveals to us. It is though only people whose eyes were open to noticing God's will amid the ordinariness of their lives, who recognize the significance of these spiritual moments. I'm sure there were many who were so busy stuffing their faces at the feeding of the 5,000 that they missed the wonder of that sign. Just as I'm sure there were many at the wedding in Cana, where Jesus changed water into wine, who were too busy making merry to marvel at that moment. Unless you people see signs and wonders, you will never believe, Jesus said. As Christians, our call is to open our eyes to those signs that God's kingdom is here, to open our ways and journeys to God's will. After all, in our oh-so-busy lives, it's too easy to miss those moments of grace, those glimpses of heaven around us, those moments when God's will is being revealed to us. The psychologist Carl Jung claimed that modern people don't see God because they don't look low enough. In other words, it's not always the big things that reveal God's will and presence. Sometimes he's in the small details, in the goldfinches. Jung even had a word for those moments or events where meaningful coincidences happen: synchronicity. Such moments in the ordinariness of our lives, those goldfish moments, are the signs that God's kingdom is all around us. Not that they're easy to recognize, especially when we face times of suffering, pain, or grief. But these are shafts of light in the darkness of our struggles. By opening ourselves to God's will in the small and seemingly insignificant details of our everyday lives, a path of hope is illuminated and our journey can be transformed. Reflection. A prayer to be prayed slowly and mindfully. Allow each word and phrase to inspire your walk with God. God of the everyday, we know that you come to us disguised in our lives. Help us to take time daily to glimpse you in the apparent ordinariness of our existence. Inspire us to open our ways, emotions and decisions to the light of your loving will. In Jesus' name, Amen.